she playfully asked. "What's got you so happy lately?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "DNA results. You're pregnant. He's the father. And I'm finally free." Her entire world collapsed in one sentence. It's amazing how quickly the foundation of your entire life can shift when you finally get concrete proof of what you've suspected for months. I stood in Derek's laboratory that Tuesday morning, holding the paternity test results that confirmed what my gut had been screaming for weeks. Derek, my college buddy who worked as a lab technician at the medical center, handed me the envelope with a grim expression. "Austin, I'm sorry, man. The results are definitive. You're excluded as the biological father." The words hit like ice water, even though I'd been bracing for this moment since I'd submitted the samples. 3 months earlier, I discovered a hidden ultrasound appointment card tucked away in Vanessa's car glove compartment while looking for registration papers after a minor fender bender. The appointment was scheduled for a Thursday morning, the same day she told me she was working late on quarterly budget reports. When I confronted her about it that evening, she claimed it was just a routine gynecological checkup she'd forgotten to mention, but her defensive tone and inability to meet my eyes told a different story. That night marked the beginning of what I now realize was the slow unraveling of our 6-year marriage. Vanessa had started exhibiting unusual behavior patterns several months before my discovery. She'd moved to the guest bedroom on the 2nd floor, claiming her work-related stress was causing severe insomnia that required complete silence and darkness to manage. Her explanation seemed reasonable at first. She'd recently been promoted to senior financial analyst at her firm and was handling more demanding client portfolios. But the physical separation felt calculated, like she was creating deliberate distance between us. The mysterious Thursday evening book club meetings began around the same time. Every week, Vanessa would leave the house at 7 sharp, carrying a different novel and claiming to discuss contemporary literature with neighborhood women. When I asked about the books or tried to engage her in conversations about what they discussed, her responses were vague and inconsistent. She couldn't name the other members, couldn't describe where they met, and seemed uncomfortable whenever I showed genuine interest in her supposed literary pursuits. Her phone behavior became increasingly secretive during this period. Previously, Vanessa had been casual about leaving her device around the house, but suddenly she was guarding it like classified information. She'd take it to the bathroom, keep it face down during dinner, and would quickly close apps whenever I approached. When calls came in during our time together, she'd excuse herself to another room, speaking in hushed tones that made ordinary conversations sound clandestine. I started paying attention to these inconsistencies with the methodical approach I used in my work as a systems analyst. One evening, I casually mentioned to our mailman that I was considering joining Vanessa's neighborhood running group, thinking it might be good exercise and couple time. He looked genuinely confused and told me there wasn't any organized running group in our subdivision. He'd been delivering mail here for 8 years and knew about all the community activities. That conversation confirmed my growing suspicions that Vanessa was constructing elaborate lies to cover her real activities. The evidence was circumstantial but mounting, and Derek's laboratory results had just provided the concrete proof I needed to move forward. I knew that having proof wasn't enough. I needed to build an airtight case before making any moves. The next phase required systematic evidence gathering and legal preparation while maintaining the appearance of normalcy in our deteriorating marriage. I started by accessing our shared computer's backup files, something Vanessa had forgotten I'd configured years earlier for our home office system. Late at night, while she slept upstairs, I methodically retrieved deleted emails from the past 8 months. What I discovered was devastating in its thoroughness. Detailed correspondence with someone named Trevor discussing everything from hotel reservations to careful coordination of her pregnancy timeline to avoid suspicion. The emails revealed how they'd strategically planned her book club meetings to coincide with their encounters, and how she'd been deliberately misleading me about her due date to make the timing seem plausible. One particularly damning email chain showed her expressing concern about morning sickness symptoms and Trevor reassuring her that I wouldn't suspect anything if she attributed them to work stress. While Vanessa assumed I was attending mandatory corporate training sessions related to a company restructuring I'd fabricated, I was actually meeting with family law attorney Robert Kane. I'd selected him specifically because his firm handled high-asset divorces and had a reputation for protecting clients in cases involving adultery and fraud. During our initial consultation, Robert explained how Vanessa's deception regarding paternity could significantly impact property division and spousal support calculations. He advised me to document everything methodically and avoid confronting her until we had comprehensive legal protections in place. Following Robert's guidance, I began carefully restructuring our financial arrangements. I liquidated our joint investment accounts gradually, transferring the funds to individual accounts that Vanessa couldn't access. Since I'd been the primary income earner throughout our marriage, removing my authorization from shared business accounts was straightforward. The bank required only my signature to close joint access. When we'd refinanced our mortgage the previous year, the documentation listed only my income as qualifying collateral, which meant I had stronger legal standing regarding our home's ownership. The most critical step was ensuring the DNA evidence was absolutely conclusive. Derek arranged for an additional analysis using samples I'd collected from Vanessa's coffee cup, a process that required careful timing and sterilized collection techniques to avoid contamination. When those results came back with identical conclusions, confirming zero probability of my paternity, I knew I had irrefutable scientific evidence that would hold up in any legal proceeding. Throughout this period, I maintained my regular routines to avoid raising Vanessa's suspicions. I continued our weekly grocery shopping trips, maintained our social calendar, and responded normally to her increasingly strained attempts at conversation. She'd begun asking more frequent questions about my whereabouts and seemed nervous about my mood changes, but I attributed my improved demeanor to work projects and stress management techniques. The irony wasn't lost on me that while she was constructing elaborate deceptions, I was conducting my own covert operation, but mine was focused on protecting myself legally rather than betraying our marriage vows. Robert had emphasized the importance of patience during this preparation phase, explaining that premature confrontation could allow Vanessa to hide assets or create false narratives that might complicate divorce proceedings. Every evening, I compiled additional evidence while she remained upstairs, building a comprehensive case file that documented her systematic betrayal and pregnancy fraud with timestamps, financial records, and medical documentation I'd obtained through legitimate channels. Once I had conclusive proof and legal safeguards in place, I began what Robert called psychological warfare through strategic behavioral changes. The goal was to make Vanessa increasingly uncomfortable by displaying uncharacteristic confidence and optimism, essentially letting her own guilt and paranoia work against her. I started humming around the house, something I hadn't done in months. When she asked about my improved mood during breakfast one morning, I simply smiled and said, "Just feeling good about life lately." Sometimes things have a way of working themselves out. The change in my demeanor was dramatic and intentional. Previously, I'd been withdrawn and stressed, largely due to her emotional distance and suspicious behavior. Now I walked with purpose, spoke with confidence, and seemed genuinely content for the first time in months. Vanessa noticed immediately, and her discomfort was palpable. She started asking probing questions about my mysterious afternoon errands, clearly trying to understand what had triggered my transformation. "You've been different lately," she said one evening, studying my face with obvious suspicion. "More confident. What's going on?" I looked up from my laptop with a knowing smile. "I've received some life-altering news recently. Everything's finally clicking into place." Her face went pale. "What kind of news?" "The kind that changes everything," I replied, returning to my work. "Sometimes you get information that puts your whole life in perspective." Vanessa's paranoia intensified over the following weeks. She began monitoring my movements more closely, asking detailed questions about where I'd been and who I'd spoken with. When I mentioned casually that I'd been thinking about her Thursday book club discussions, she became visibly agitated. "Oh, last week's book was fascinating," I said over dinner. "What was the group's take on the unreliable narrator technique? That's such a complex literary device, when the person telling the story can't be trusted to tell the truth." The color drained from her face as she realized she couldn't substantiate any specific literary discussions because there weren't any. "We talked about different themes," she stammered. Character development and plot structure. Interesting. Which character did you find most deceptive? The one who thinks they're fooling everyone but actually reveals their true nature through their actions. She excused herself from the table abruptly, claiming she felt nauseous. These strategic conversations became more frequent and pointed. I'd reference specific authors and ask for her insights on books she'd supposedly discussed, watching her scramble to provide vague responses that revealed her complete ignorance. When she couldn't answer basic questions about contemporary literature, I'd comment thoughtfully about how some people construct elaborate fictional narratives to hide their real activities. Her composure deteriorated rapidly as she began to suspect I knew more than I was revealing. She started accusing me of hiring private investigators to monitor her activities, demanding to know if I was tracking her phone or following her on Thursday evenings. "Are you having me watched?" she confronted me one morning, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "You're acting like you know something. What do you think you know?" I maintained calm composure, which seemed to unnerve her even more. "I don't think anything, Vanessa. I know exactly what I need to know. The question is whether you're ready to have an honest conversation about it." These confrontations became explosive as her guilt and paranoia reached a breaking point. She alternated between demanding explanations for my behavior and attempting to deflect attention by accusing me of being controlling and paranoid. But her increasingly frantic responses only confirmed that she understood her deception was unraveling, and that I was orchestrating the psychological pressure with deliberate precision. The time had come for the crushing confrontation that would expose everything. I chose a Saturday morning when Vanessa was relaxed and unprepared, sitting at our kitchen table with her coffee and phone. I walked in carrying a manila folder containing months of evidence and placed it deliberately on the table between us. "We need to have that honest conversation now," I said, my voice calm but unmistakably serious. "About your pregnancy, Trevor, and the DNA results that prove I'm not the father." The coffee cup slipped from her hands, spilling across the table as her face went completely white. For several seconds, she sat frozen, staring at the folder like it contained a bomb. Then the denials began, frantic, desperate attempts to maintain her elaborate charade even as it crumbled around her. "What are you talking about? DNA results? Austin, I don't understand what you're saying. This is insane." I opened the folder methodically, spreading the laboratory reports across the table. Derek ran 2 separate analyses. Both conclusively exclude me as the biological father. 0 probability. Not even a margin of error. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the papers, scanning them with growing horror. "This can't be right. There must be some mistake. I haven't been with anyone else." "Really?" I pulled out printed copies of her deleted emails with Trevor, watching her face crumble as she recognized her own words. "Because these conversations suggest otherwise." 8 months of detailed planning, hotel reservations, discussions about timing the pregnancy reveal to avoid suspicion. She tried to grab the papers, but I calmly moved them out of reach. "How did you get these? You had no right to invade my privacy like this." "Our shared computer, Vanessa. The backup system I configured years ago that you forgot about. Everything's been automatically saved." I continued laying out evidence with surgical precision. Credit card statements showing charges at hotels you never mentioned visiting. Medical appointments you scheduled during your supposed work meetings. Text messages with Trevor discussing how to manage morning sickness symptoms without raising my suspicions. Each piece of evidence hit her like a physical blow. She started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone realizing they'd been completely outmaneuvered. "Austin, please, let me explain. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like." I placed the divorce petition on top of the evidence pile. Filed 5 days ago. Robert Kane is representing me. Community property laws don't apply when adultery and fraud are involved. The mention of my attorney's name made her gasp. She'd obviously recognized the name from his reputation for handling high-stakes divorce cases. "You've been planning this for months while I thought we were working through our problems." "We didn't have problems, Vanessa. You had an affair and got pregnant, then tried to pass off another man's child as mine. That's not a marital problem, that's fraud. Her composure finally shattered completely. Between broken sobs, the truth came pouring out in a desperate confession. It started 8 months ago at the gym. Trevor was my personal trainer, and he made me feel attractive again. You were always working, always focused on your projects, and I felt invisible in our marriage. He paid attention to me, made me feel desired. I listened without interruption as she revealed the systematic deception. Thursday evenings were spent at his apartment. The pregnancy was discovered during their 4th month of the affair, and they'd both panicked about the timing. Trevor had convinced her that I'd never suspect if she carefully managed the reveal and maintained our limited physical intimacy. I never meant for it to go this far, she sobbed. I thought the feelings would fade, that I could end it and things would go back to normal between us. When I found out about the pregnancy, I was terrified. Trevor said we had to protect ourselves, that telling the truth would destroy everything. So you decided to destroy me instead, I said quietly. Let me believe I was going to be a father, let me plan for a future that was built on lies. She reached across the table desperately. Austin, I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but our marriage can survive this. People work through infidelity all the time. Not when it involves paternity fraud and 8 months of systematic deception. I stood up, gathering the evidence. Trevor's probably told his girlfriend about you by now, assuming he has one. Most personal trainers don't limit themselves to one client relationship. The look of additional betrayal that crossed her face suggested she'd believed Trevor's claims about their exclusive connection. She was learning in real time that she'd been played by someone even more manipulative than herself. Despite having her entire deception exposed, Vanessa launched into increasingly desperate manipulation tactics over the following days. She called in sick to work and spent hours researching couples therapy options, presenting me with printed brochures and testimonials about marriages surviving infidelity. Dr. Patricia Williams specializes in rebuilding trust after affairs, she said frantically, spreading pamphlets across the coffee table. She has a 90% success rate with couples who commit to her intensive program. Austin, we can fix this if we both want to try. I remained resolute in my decision. Vanessa, you're carrying another man's child. There's no therapy that addresses paternity fraud on this scale. She promised to terminate all contact with Trevor permanently, offering to change gyms, delete his contact information, and provide complete transparency about her whereabouts going forward. I'll quit my job if necessary. We can move to a different city, start completely fresh where nobody knows what happened. I'll do anything to save our marriage. When emotional appeals failed, her tactics became increasingly manipulative and desperate. She threatened to fabricate domestic violence allegations, claiming she had documentation of my controlling behavior during our marriage. People will believe that you've been psychologically abusive, she said with calculated coldness. A woman doesn't have an affair unless something's wrong at home. I can make this very ugly for you professionally. I'd anticipated this possibility and had been recording our conversations with my phone, ensuring I had evidence of her attempting to blackmail me with false accusations. Feel free to try that approach, Vanessa. Robert's office handles defamation cases as well as divorce proceedings. Her next desperate offer was to terminate the pregnancy immediately, claiming she'd realized her mistake and wanted to eliminate all evidence of the affair. We can schedule the procedure this week. Trevor never has to know, and we can pretend none of this ever happened. I'll get therapy for my issues and be the wife you deserved from the beginning. The suggestion was both heartless and strategically meaningless, since terminating the pregnancy wouldn't erase 8 months of systematic deception and betrayal. That decision is between you and Trevor, I told her. This isn't about the baby, it's about your character and the foundation of lies our marriage was built on. When she realized I couldn't be manipulated or bargained with, Vanessa tried to weaponize my professional reputation by threatening to contact my employer with fabricated stories about our marriage problems. I'll tell them you've been unstable, that you're going through a breakdown that's affecting your judgment and work performance. I'd already spoken with my supervisor about the divorce proceedings, explaining the situation professionally and providing assurance that my personal issues wouldn't impact my job responsibilities. My work performance had actually improved since discovering the truth, as the mental clarity of having concrete answers had eliminated months of stress and uncertainty. The most satisfying moment came when Vanessa desperately contacted Trevor for emotional support, expecting him to provide comfort during her crisis. I'd already verified through Derek's connections that Trevor had been simultaneously involved with at least 2 other clients from the gym, including a long-term relationship with another woman who believed they were exclusive. When Trevor's primary girlfriend discovered the extent of his deceptions through social media posts that mentioned multiple relationships, she'd not only ended their relationship but had also pressed charges for financial fraud after discovering he'd been using her credit cards for expenses related to his other affairs. Trevor had disappeared from the area within days of these revelations becoming public, abandoning his personal training clients and leaving no forwarding information. When Vanessa called him expecting support and solidarity, she discovered his number had been disconnected and his social media accounts deleted. The gym management informed her that Trevor had been terminated for violating professional conduct policies regarding client relationships and had left town without notice. She was learning that the man she'd destroyed her marriage for was a serial manipulator who'd used identical tactics with multiple women, and that she'd been just another mark in his ongoing scheme of exploiting vulnerable clients for financial and sexual benefits. As news of the divorce proceedings spread through our professional and personal circles, I experienced an unexpected wave of support that dramatically improved both my social standing and career prospects. Colleagues who'd noticed my improved demeanor and increased focus began learning the full scope of Vanessa's betrayal through mutual acquaintances, and their reactions were overwhelmingly supportive of my situation. My supervisor, Janet, called me into her office 3 weeks after I'd informed her about the divorce. "Austin, I want you to know that your handling of this personal crisis has demonstrated exceptional professionalism and emotional resilience. The leadership team has been discussing your performance, and we're impressed by how you've maintained your work quality while managing such a difficult situation." The conversation led to an unexpected opportunity that transformed my career trajectory. "We're creating a new regional operations director position, and your analytical skills and proven ability to handle complex situations make you our top candidate. The role comes with a 45% salary increase and oversight of 3 satellite offices." I accepted the promotion immediately, recognizing that my enhanced focus and decision-making capabilities had been noticed by senior management. The personal crisis had actually strengthened my professional reputation by demonstrating my ability to handle adversity with systematic precision and emotional stability. Meanwhile, Vanessa faced increasing social ostracism as mutual friends learned the details of her deception and pregnancy fraud. Our close friends, Mark and Jennifer, had been particularly supportive during my difficult period, and Jennifer later told me about encounters with Vanessa that revealed her declining social circumstances. She approached me at the grocery store last week, wanting to explain her side of the story. Jennifer explained. "She looked terrible, stressed, exhausted, obviously struggling financially. When she started talking about how complicated the situation was, I told her that paternity fraud isn't complicated, it's just wrong." Other mutual acquaintances distanced themselves from Vanessa as word spread about the systematic nature of her deception. She'd lost not just her marriage, but the entire social network we'd built together over 6 years. Her attempts to maintain friendships were met with polite but firm boundaries, as people didn't want to be associated with someone capable of such elaborate betrayal. The isolation forced Vanessa to relocate to her sister's guest house across town, a significant downgrade from our spacious suburban home. Her sister, Rachel, had apparently been vocal about her disapproval of Vanessa's choices, creating additional tension in what should have been her support system. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Vanessa was struggling with both the practical and emotional consequences of her choices, having lost her primary income source when she took extended leave from work due to stress. 6 months after our confrontation, I accidentally encountered Vanessa at the medical center where Derek worked. I was there for a routine appointment when I saw her in the prenatal clinic waiting area, looking overwhelmed and alone. She appeared to have lost significant weight despite being visibly pregnant, and her overall demeanor suggested someone under enormous stress. She noticed me before I could redirect my path, and our eyes met briefly across the waiting room. I saw recognition, shame, and what might have been hope flicker across her face before I maintained my course toward the elevator without acknowledgement. Derek later mentioned that he'd seen her there as well, and that she'd been asking the staff about reduced-cost prenatal programs for uninsured patients. Apparently, her employment situation had deteriorated to the point where she'd lost her health benefits, and she was navigating pregnancy complications without adequate medical support or financial resources. Despite experiencing momentary compassion for her difficult circumstances, I maintained strict emotional boundaries that Robert had advised during our legal proceedings. Her situation was the direct result of choices she'd made, and allowing myself to feel responsible for her welfare would be both inappropriate and psychologically damaging to my own recovery process. The divorce proceedings concluded 8 months later with a decisively favorable outcome that validated my methodical approach to evidence gathering and legal preparation. Robert's strategy of documenting Vanessa's adultery and fraud comprehensively had eliminated her ability to claim significant marital assets or ongoing spousal support. The court awarded her minimal settlement, essentially her personal belongings and half the value of her car, while I retained our home, investment accounts, and retirement savings that I'd protected during the preparation phase. Her attempts to argue for traditional community property division were undermined by the systematic nature of her deception and the substantial financial resources I'd invested in our marriage under fraudulent pretenses. With the legal resolution complete, I relocated to an upscale waterfront condominium downtown that represented both a fresh start and a significant upgrade in my living situation. The two-bedroom unit featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, modern appliances, and access to amenities that my increased salary made easily affordable. For the first time in years, I was living in a space that reflected my actual preferences rather than compromises made for a relationship built on deception. I began reconstructing my personal life through industry networking events and recreational activities that I'd neglected during my marriage. The regional operations role required attendance at quarterly conferences and professional development seminars, which provided opportunities to meet like-minded professionals and expand my social circle beyond the friends Vanessa and I had shared. At a corporate charity gala supporting medical research initiatives, I met Sophia Martinez, a museum curator specializing in contemporary art acquisitions. She was there representing the city's art museum, which had received grant funding from several technology companies, including my firm. Our initial conversation focused on the intersection of technology and artistic expression, but quickly evolved into discussions about classical music, international cuisine, and travel experiences that revealed genuine intellectual compatibility. Sophia possessed qualities that stood in stark contrast to Vanessa's superficiality and materialism. She was passionate about her work preserving cultural heritage, financially independent through her museum position and freelance consulting, and maintained friendships based on shared interests rather than social status or financial benefit. Our relationship developed organically over several months of museum visits, concert attendance, and dinners where we split checks naturally without discussion or resentment. The difference between authentic compatibility and the performative relationship I'd maintained with Vanessa became increasingly apparent as Sophia and I discovered genuine shared values and complementary life goals. 8 months following the divorce finalization, I learned through our former neighbor Jennifer that Vanessa had experienced significant delivery complications requiring emergency medical intervention. The premature birth had resulted in extended hospital stays for both mother and child, creating substantial medical debt that her minimal insurance coverage couldn't address. She was apparently working multiple part-time positions, retail sales, and food service, while living in a cramped apartment and struggling with the demands of single motherhood. Trevor had completely abandoned all responsibilities related to the child when legal documents were filed establishing paternity and potential child support obligations. According to Jennifer, he'd moved to another state and was working under an assumed name to avoid financial accountability for his actions. The man who'd convinced Vanessa to destroy her marriage had proven to be exactly the type of person who abandons responsibility when consequences become inconvenient. As I reflected on these developments while preparing dinner in my waterfront kitchen, with Sophia arriving shortly to attend a symphony performance together, I realized how completely my life had transformed. Uncovering the devastating truth about Vanessa's betrayal had initially felt like emotional destruction, but ultimately liberated me to pursue authentic relationships and career achievements that I'd previously compromised for a marriage founded on systematic deception. The woman who'd called me her financial safety net had discovered the actual cost of security built on lies, while I'd found genuine partnership with someone who valued honesty, intellectual connection, and mutual respect over material benefits.